Well, as I'm sure you could have expected, MAGA Republican Congresswoman Lauren Boebert is out spewing nonsense about the Trump verdict. And luckily, we'll get to Democratic Congressman Ro Khanna shutting her nonsense down. But before we do that, let me play this clip of Lauren Boebert in an interview saying this.
There's a lot of emotions. It's almost not surprising because of where they held this trial.
Come closer. Okay. Every single week, millions of people watch the show who aren't subscribed to it. YouTube metrics tells us that's crazy town. So it breaks my heart if I think too long about it. If you're a regular viewer and you do like the show, makes a huge difference just to click that subscribe button and help us continue to grow.
Where they found the jurors, they're in New York. And unfortunately, this was rigged from the beginning against President Trump. Well, Governor Jerry.
And the nonsense we've heard before, no need to dive into that a bunch, but she also wrote on X, as we all knew, this was always about election interference and stopping President Trump from winning his rightful reelection to the White House. The American people see through the Democrat games and know this is a sham verdict. We stand with President Donald J. Trump. And with that being said, I want to bring in Congressman Ro Khanna. Congressman, it's great to be back with you.
Thanks for having me back on.
So I want to get your response to Lauren Boebert's remarks about the verdict. It's tired talking points we've heard quite a bit, and then also just speak to the broader narrative that's being pushed aggressively. This is the topic right now within right-wing media. It's all over the place that Trump was unfairly treated in this trial. This verdict is illegitimate, and more dangerously, what we've been covering a lot here on the show is that this is now causing a constant call for now Republicans need to weaponize their power to go after Democrats and punish them for Trump's legal accountability. So give us your response to that, Congressman.
Well, it's sad and it's scary. I mean, for a Republican Party that celebrates America and American exceptionalism to be attacking our judicial system is appalling. I mean, this was not the Democrats who came up with this decision. It wasn't Democrats in Congress. It was 12 people on a jury who unanimously agreed, and they agreed in the matter of hours, that the president was guilty on all 34 counts. That's the essence of our jury system. And as Larry Hogan, Republican from Maryland, said, you have to respect that process. The president has the ability to appeal like anyone else, but what this shows is no one in our country is above the rule of law.
Absolutely. And on that, one of the things that really made unhappy MAGA folks during the trial was later on, Biden campaign surrogates went outside of the courthouse and spoke on behalf of President Biden. The argument went, and I resonated with this, if all the press is going to be here covering this is where the media is, then we need to be here too. It can't just be the Trump show. We need to have the truth getting out on this. And so similarly, the next thing that's really making people unhappy and is proof to them that, see, Biden's proving that this was some way to hurt Trump politically, somehow coordinated by him with absolutely no evidence, is him referring to Trump as a convicted felon. Strategically, we heard even on Fox News them saying, oh, that's going to alienate convicted felons from voting for Biden. Where do you land on that, the strategy of leaning into calling Trump a convicted felon, bringing that up repetitively for President Biden's reelection?
Well, first of all, it's the right thing to do. I mean, the American people should consider if someone has been a convicted felon. Character doesn't matter. The president is the embodiment of the American people. He represents who we are around the world. And it's absolutely relevant if someone was convicted of a felony. I mean, think if someone was running against me for Congress or for Senate or governor, and if they were a convicted felon, of course the media would talk about it. Of course their opposition would talk about it. So of course President Biden is going to highlight that. Now, is that going to be enough? I don't think it's enough. I think we also need a compelling economic contrast and why President Biden is better on economic issues. But it's certainly relevant, and we should put the facts in front of the American people.
Absolutely. So let's move off that to some current event type thing. So one of the big things recently that made news was President Joe Biden signing executive actions relating to the southern border. And last time you were on, we talked about the border. How do we measure on the border? How do we discuss the policy on the southern border, given that this issue is probably more than any other issue, maybe Biden's age, but the issue that Republicans are going after Biden over. And to me, the bipartisan border deal was a great example of it all being talk and not being serious about actually solving these problems, but enjoying fear-mongering about them. But now here, Republicans are again aghast by the fact that Biden did some of what they've sort of been asking for. I know that you disagree with Biden on the policy of this executive action. Speak to why you disagree and also just the political strategy of now acting. And then the follow-up to that is people are asking, why did Biden wait this long to act unilaterally as president? And in the meantime, while there was all the Congress debacle, why didn't he act given the urgency of this subject?
Let me start with the last one. The Republicans have no good faith in this. Even when President Biden basically offered the Republican version of the bill on border security, Donald Trump told them not to sign it. And the reason the president has waited is that he knows that the real solution is a congressional solution, a comprehensive solution, that anything else is not going to fix the problem. And that's why I'm against the executive order. I understand that the president felt his hands were tied because Congress isn't doing what he wants them to do. But this artificially capping the level of asylum entrance into the United States is inconsistent with our philosophy. It's not something that we have done. And it's also going to put asylum seekers at greater risk. It's not that they're not going to come to the United States. It's simply that they no longer will come to the ports of entry. And they may now go with smugglers. They may come in more dangerous ways. And so it's not fixing the problem. What would fix the problem is actually having more border patrol agents, having more immigration judges, having a path to citizenship for folks who are here undocumented, and a path to being able to work here legally through work permitting for people coming to do agricultural or retail work, which American corporations are hiring them to do. And what George W. Bush was talking about in terms of getting workers through an orderly process. But this isn't going to fix either the number of people coming here. It's just going to make life harder for those immigrants.
Right. And this is sort of maybe a tough question to answer, pretty abstract. But why is, to me, as someone who's keeping up with this, talking about it, it doesn't make sense that the American people don't have a more positive view of the Democratic policies, even though we're not seeing a ton of implementation given the obstruction. But right now, this is a winning issue for Republicans. And when I hear Trump, for example, speak on it, okay, sure, he can go through that list of all the different highly fictionalized stories of the most horrific thing that you could possibly imagine related to the border, but he's not actually proposing meaningful policy. If you can speak to this, why is it? What are Democrats doing wrong in their messaging? What's the misperception that this is a winning issue for Republicans, given the facts that we've talked about now and in the past?
Well, certainly the right-wing media has made it a huge deal by showing images of people coming across the border, something that they didn't do when Trump was president, when that was happening prior to COVID, or they didn't do nearly as much until Trump was running in midterms, and then they would show those images. So I think it's a cynical strategy. But look, it speaks to a deeper issue in this country, and that is that we are becoming a more multiracial, multi-ethnic democracy. And for some people, that there's fear. What about our traditions? What about our faith? What about our culture? What about all these different languages in America, all these different cuisines? And the truth is that we need to find a way of being aspirational about the American story and yet making a case that people coming, as they always have, enrich that story and make it more vibrant. And it's not about losing something, it's about gaining something. But that's really at the heart of why immigration is such a fraud issue. It's not just about the border, it's about who we are as a country. And for some people, and many people, a fear that we're changing and a fear of that change.
Right. So moving on from that, one of the questions I'm asked constantly as someone who talks about politics is people coming with fear in their eyes and saying, the polls, oh my gosh, the polls, Trump's leading in so many polls. And I feel that way too. It is freaky. I have explanations as to why this isn't a complete panic mode yet type of moment. Let's just keep doing the work no matter what the polls say. We have the same job to do before November, and that's making sure that Donald Trump loses, Biden wins re-election. What is your response as someone out there speaking with a lot of voters when people pose that to you? Oh, it's all looking horrible. What do we do? Why do the polls look so bad?
I'd say the past 5 or 6 national elections since 2000 have been razor close, other than President Obama's massive win in 2008. So we shouldn't expect that this election would be any different. We have a divided country, and it's going to be decided by a few 100,000 votes in a few battleground states. And all of the polling, people get freaked out about 1 or 2 points movement, but it goes from Biden 46-45, Trump 46-45. I mean, it goes back and forth. And so we need to run through the tape because this is a close race that could go either way. Now, I wish, given the president's record, that this wasn't a close race, and especially given the opponent. But that's not where we are as a country. We're deeply divided, and we just have to acknowledge that fact and then run hard. But even if you think President Biden's down by a point as opposed to up by a point, and who knows which poll is right, it's hardly the moment to despair. I mean, so he either has a 49 or 51% chance. A lot of that's going to depend on how hard we work.
Right. And my message to people, too, has been eventually we got to have a conversation about just emotionally, how do we process this situation we're in, where given the facts as we've observed them, we could possibly have it be this close, given who Trump is, given him trying to block the peaceful transfer of power last time he was president, and everything we've learned about him since, now being a convicted felon. And it's going to be close, even if it goes the way we want it to. But maybe we hold off on figuring out how we feel and processing the absurdity of that moment and just focus on winning. And we got to do the same work no matter where the polls stand right before Election Day. So I agree with you on that. One thing that I guess I would describe it as bothers me is so many of your Democratic colleagues are not out there making the case like you are. And you go on Fox News, you're explaining to people in a pretty pragmatic way the record of Biden and the importance of this election. And we'll talk about your visits to colleges in just a little bit. One of the things I tell my audience is go out there and get 2 people in your personal life to understand the importance of this election, and then go out and encourage them to do the same and encouraging people to go out and vote for Biden. With you, a lot of your quote unquote friends, people that you're colleagues with, are powerful Democrats. Are you having those conversations with the people in Congress who are not out making the case for Biden, are a little bit more hesitant? Sure, they're going to say he's the guy that needs to win, but it's not the loud, proud case that I hear some Democrats making. And is that also something that you're worried about seeing?
Well, you've got given great advice. That's exactly right. That's how we're going to win this election. If all your listeners, all your followers talk to 2 people. And, people love to be asked for their vote. People love to be asked about their opinion in public life and politics. I mean, that's what makes us a great country. Every person is equal. It doesn't matter whether you're a CEO, whether you're an administrative assistant, whether you're a congressman. On November 5th, we're all going to have the same amount of influence, 1 vote. And so talking to people, asking them makes a big difference. And look, I think all this fanciful thinking is Biden going to run, not going to run. I endorsed him back in 2022 before the midterms. I said, he's the incumbent president. He's done all these great things. He's our candidate. We got to get behind him, and we got to win. And we need to be out there talking about him having the biggest climate bill, talking about him having passed infrastructure when no one else did, talking about him bringing manufacturing back with semiconductors, talking about him having the biggest science investment since the Kennedy years, and then talking about his second-term agenda, which is going to be to lower childcare costs, to figure out how to stabilize rent, to help make home ownership more possible, to have taxes on the very wealthy instead of massive deficits, and what Trump's going to do, which is basically give a tax cut the very wealthy. How do I know? Because that's what Trump did in his first 4 years. So we need to make this case with pride, with conviction, with passion. And if we do that, we're going to win. If we sort of agonize and accept and engage in parlor games about who's going to be a potential candidate at the convention, all things that happen on West Wing but don't happen in the real world, that's the chance that we lose this election.
100% agree on the message. You summarized it effectively and exactly right. And also, I'm irritated by the, like you said, sort of West Wing theoretical, oh, what if we did this and replaced them with that? And I think people don't understand whatever instability you feel comes with the candidacy of Biden, 10x if we throw him out and try to, this late in the game, replace it with someone else. And I don't even understand the logistics of that if he weren't on board with it. And we could just use the energy we'd spend for one of those wacky scenarios, investing in the reelection campaign. So I guess my request to you is, as someone who is making the case effectively and loudly and in the play, meeting people where they are, whatever you can do to encourage some of the more quiet members of Congress to get out there and make some noise, I'd greatly appreciate it. And speaking of that, talk about your visits to colleges in swing states and what your goal is and how you're messaging for younger Americans in particular.
I've been going to many college campuses, and I was all over college campuses in Wisconsin. One thing to remember is there are many more campuses than just the University of Wisconsin-Madison or Columbia or Stanford or Northwestern. In University of Wisconsin, I went to Eau Claire and Stevens Point and Green Bay. There are 4,000 colleges in this country. And we need to understand the breadth of that and the things that matter on the minds of young people. Abortion rights is front and center, especially in Wisconsin, where there's an arcane law that bans it, and the Supreme Court in Wisconsin still hasn't overturned that law. The financial situation is on the mind of young people. They can't afford rent, and the president has a plan to help try to stabilize rent. They can't afford some of their student loans. They have too much medical debt. All of these things are things that the president has addressed and will continue to address. And people say, well, why, if he's had 4 years, aren't things magically fine? Well, for 40 years, we've hollowed out the working and middle class. No one could turn it around in 3 years. This is going to take decades to fix. But the president is in the direction of fixing it. And his agenda is really resonating economically with young people. Now, Gaza is a honest issue. I've been critical of some of the administration's policies there, and I think the president has moved in a very positive way with laying out a permanent ceasefire plan and calling for an end to the war. And what I say is that shows that the president is listening. You may not agree with him. You may not think that he's handled everything correctly. But I'll tell you this: Donald Trump isn't going to listen at all to your criticism. He's not just going to give Netanyahu a blank check. He'll give him the keys. So the choice is stark if you care about peace in the Middle East.
There it is. Congressman Ro Khanna, always an absolute delight speaking with you. Thanks for being on.
Thank you, Luke. Thank you for being out there yourself and your voice.